Okay, so let me paint a picture for you guys. You might have sent a DM to another filmmaker or production company in the city and you want to shoot behind the scenes content. Now they accept and you showed up with your fully rigged camera, your really expensive lens, you're shooting a whole bunch of footage in f1.2 or maybe you're shooting in 60 frames a second most of the time. You send everything back to that client and then they don't ever actually talk to you again, which leaves you a little bit frustrated, confused, and wondering what actually went wrong. So in today's video, we're actually going to talk about how to shoot behind the scenes footage the right way, so that way that DM doesn't leave you on red. We'll get to it. Now, the first tip I'm going to give to you is actually go in Stealthy. Reduce your kit to make it a little bit more compact and a little bit less conspicuous, so when you're getting behind the scenes footage, you're actually not slowed down. In essence, you're going to be a ninja from the hidden filmmaking village, and most of the time, children are seen and not heard, and in behind the scenes content, you want to be neither. Now, the second thing I'm going to tell you is actually be behind the scene, and not just physically, but also your composition as well. Your job is to capture everything that the camera and the production is actually trying to hide, and not to be a second camera angle for that production, because if they needed a second operator, they would have hired one. Now, in the early days when I got behind the scenes footage back, I ended up just getting a bunch of rehashed images and compositions of stuff I already lit for. And none of it was really behind the scenes. If anything, it just kind of felt like that person was grabbing compositions for themselves to make their own video with, which is never going to be useful content for another production company or another filmmaker. Generally speaking, you want to be able to get bigger and wider shots, and that way you're going to be able to capture everything that's going on in terms of what it took to make the actual film, rather than just getting secondary or third angles for the film itself. And next, we're going to talk about holding your shot, and not just holding it to just capture one frame, but really hold on to it almost to the point where it's a little bit uncomfortable. In fact, think of the longest last name that you can spell and spell each individual letter in order to find out whether or not you're holding the shot for long enough. The reason why you want to do this, especially if someone's in the education space or they're teaching something, is to actually have enough time to voice over a shot and for the viewer to see what's happening. If your camera's moving all over the place while getting a shot, it's going to make it really difficult for any of that footage to be usable. And if you're still confused, try this test out. Take one of the SD cards from something you shot behind the scenes from and try to make your own YouTube video for it. Now, if you find that some of the shots are a little bit too quick and jittery for you to be able to get a sentence out, well then, the person you sent the footage to probably can't use it very much either. Next tip is gonna be wider die, or just getting wider shots in general. Back to actually capturing behind the scene, if you get wider shots on wider focal lengths, then it's gonna be a lot easier to do that at the same time. Generally speaking, I like to stick between 20 to 35 millimeters in terms of my lens choice, so that way when I back up and I want to be seen and not heard or not seen at all, it's easier for me to get those shots of capturing the entire scene as it's happening. And I've actually been only packing these two lenses for most shoots, and sometimes I only pack a 24 to 70 and I'm off to the races and I'm good to go. So you want to be able to get bigger and wider shots, especially when you're working on bigger productions and you want to capture everything from the camera equipment that's going to be used, the grip equipment, or even how some of the crew is actually working on set. That way, when you deliver it back to particularly production companies, a lot of that footage is going to end up being used and you're probably going to get a call back, which also means you might make a little bit more money. All right, so there are two settings that you kind of want to use sparingly when getting behind the scenes footage. Now, one is going to be shooting everything in 60 frames a second. You might be used to doing that in a lot of other things when you're getting slow motion footage, but with behind the scenes, you could ease up a little bit. People want to see a lot of stuff in real time. And secondly, it's going to be your aperture. Now, I get it. 1.4 lenses, 1.2 lenses, they're awesome. They're great. I have a couple of them. If you shoot everything in shallow depth of field, yes, the background is going to be more blurry. However, you're also probably going to lose focus on the things that actually need focus on them. Things like capturing the camera kit that's being used, or even just capturing details between the person you're filming's face and the behind the scenes footage might get lost within that aperture because you're shooting at f1.2 with an ND filter, where it's actually a little bit more reasonable to shoot at f2.8 or f4 instead to make sure that the things that are going to be in focus are actually in focus. Now, to each their own and each their own shooting style, but I find that I have a lot more useful shots when I'm shooting at some lower apertures than something that's always going to be shot at f1.4 all the time. And honestly, I don't really use slow motion behind the scenes footage, so again, different strokes for different folks, but there's that. And the most important part about shooting behind the scenes footage is treat it like it's your own film and take it a little bit more seriously. Especially if you're someone that's getting into documentary filmmaking. Well, if you think about what documentary is, it's just the behind the scenes of somebody's life, and getting behind the scenes footage is essentially just a documentary about the actual set that you're on that day. And when you think about it that way, and you think about these behind the scenes shoots like they're your own filming days, you start to make different decisions and you start to take things a little bit more seriously. You start to take your composition a little bit more seriously. You start to hone down your handheld shooting. You make the right lens selection depending on the job that you use. And a lot of the things that you would treat your own films like, you should probably treat behind the scenes just like that, because that's a major separation between that production company or director calling you back and maybe just getting left on red and trying again with somebody else, which you might get the same result. And you might be thinking if I'm only talking about this because I've had a couple of negative experiences with behind the scenes footage, and you're absolutely right, I definitely have. But instead of going the Reddit route and screaming at everybody, because that's never productive, I decided to make this video to show you guys some of the things that might be more useful with doing that behind the scenes footage, because there's a ton of different ways that you can get on set and get that experience, and you get paid for it at the same time without having to run coffees every day. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys learned something at the same time about behind the scenes footage in a way that you can get on-set experience and at the same time be incredibly useful to get that call back. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Hang on. Didn't mention audio. If you want to get audio, you want to bring something that's a little bit stealthy, kind of like this thing. It's a lav mic by Comica, pretty decent sound, and it's also an affordable price. And maybe we should talk about it.